Hi, everybody. My name is Shruti, and I'm one of the three co-founders of Neythri, along with Chitra Nayak and Maithili Sankaran. And on behalf of Neythri, I wanted to extend a very warm welcome to all of you today. The Neythri team includes a group of 70 plus incredibly motivated South Asian women who are committed to building an organization where we can foster, engage, and advance a global community of South Asian professional women of all backgrounds. And if you haven't already, we encourage you to join us as a member, and I'll share some links so that you can follow us and take a detailed look at our website and get to know more about us. Before we start, I want to share that we recognize that this is an extremely challenging time in the world, particularly in our country in light of recent events. And we're just so deeply grateful to you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedules and everything going on to discuss what we're seeing in education. I'm now excited to introduce my dear friend, Karina, who's an investor at GSV Ventures and will be moderating today's panel.
Thank you so much, Shruti, for having us and inviting me to be part of this discussion. I think, as you said, thank you to all of you for joining us during this incredibly heartbreaking time. It's definitely a difficult time in the world, and I'm thrilled to still be able to have this conversation, such an important, needed conversation, with three of my favorite entrepreneurs: Steven Wolfe Pereira, CEO of Encantos; Avni Patel Thompson, founder and CEO of Modern Village; and Neal Shenoy, CEO of Begin. The best way to start this conversation, kind of as Shruti mentioned, is with a high-level question around how we can alter, change, reform education, and kind of think about education's role in creating a more inclusive, empathetic world, because we definitely need one. So maybe, Steven, we'll start with you.
Well, again, Karina, thank you for having us, and just thanks to the team here for hosting the conversation, because I do think it's a really important time in our country, and it's not going to be going away anytime soon. We are a women-owned family entertainment education company, and what we do is we create direct-to-learner family brands that are inspired by culture, that actually have the ability to have characters that are culturally authentic. We build a brand around that, where we're going to be able to have both physical and digital products. And our goal is to really educate, engage, and entertain kids 12 and under.
Great, thank you so much. Avni, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. My name is Avni Patel Thompson. I'm the founder and CEO of Modern Village. Prior to this, I started a company called Poppy. I come to this space from the role of building solutions for parents, actually. So it's a little bit tangential to education, but still super important. Modern Village, what we're on the mission to build is the technology that kind of makes parenting collaborative, that helps support, dual working parents, realizes just the complexity of modern day life, and figures out how software can kind of help bridge some and connect some of these pieces to make it easier and, frankly, a lot more delightful than it is right now. So that's a little bit about what we're doing.
Perfect, thank you. And Neal, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Neal Shenoy. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Begin, which is the parent company to a home learning, early learning program called Homer. And the purpose of Homer is to really create the best educational start and the ideal learning journey for a young child, really focusing on 0 to 5, which effectively means parent and child as well. And we do that, similar to Steven, through digital content. We do that through physical play. We do that through experiential and classroom learning. And we do that through guiding parents as a child's first teacher as well. With regards to the topic at hand, we're all certainly thinking about and considering now, I'll share a very brief anecdote. So I don't have children, but I have a 9-year-old godson named Sebastian. And this past weekend, he asked me about what was going on and the tragic death that happened the previous week. And as a family, we tried to explain to him and give him context about discrimination, racial profiling, the injustices that African Americans and Black Americans have faced. And in a real sincere and sweet moment of innocence, he had been learning about African American history for the past few weeks in school, and he said, I thought that racism had ended with Martin Luther King and with the civil rights movement. And if you think about that, what he was implicitly saying was that we as a country 50 years ago had come to terms with the fact that there was a part of our legacy or the part of the way that we were treating our humanity and our citizenship, which was wrong. And we made some changes, and now we're expected to act right. And that's a very child-oriented view of thinking about things. They're constantly being told what is right and what is wrong. And wrong has consequences. Wrong has punishment. So after we as a society decided that all men, all women should be treated equal, didn't we start to act right as a function of that? And it was heartbreaking to explain to him that 50 years later, we had not. And so what that tells us about, I think, each of our solutions and what we try to do within Homer is that it's about dialogue and it's about modeling. We try to promote content to children that creates questions and dialogue and curiosity, because that's the best way to help shape and mold the way they think and the way they perceive their world around them. And in the content that we create, we have to model the behavior that we expect. A world with optimism and understanding and empathy, because if children watch that, that's what they expect the world to be. And too often what children are exposed to is not reflective of what we hope the world to be. And if that's a very small contribution I think we can make to raising dialogue and putting children on a path to a more optimistic and inclusive future.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I love how each of you are thinking about, educating children, but also educating parents. Now, shifting a little bit to also the other unique moment, which is coronavirus that we've all been living through for a couple months now. It's incredible to see what coronavirus has done for digital learning, because it has gone from nice to have to need to have. Over 1.6 billion students and teachers are learning online. 90% of total enrolled learners have been thrown into the deep end of the online learning pool. And the truth is, a lot of schools really lacked the infrastructure digitally to equip themselves to handle this moment. I'd love to, at a high level, ask each of you, it's been a couple months now, what are the key trends you've observed during this time as it relates to digital learning, digital education, and digital parenting? And any trends in particular that you still remain surprised by? Avni, what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, it's true that as a parent, we've probably brought on then 4 jobs at once. So we have, many of us have full-time jobs. We have to now school. We have to provide childcare. We also have to run our households without the help of if we're in a privileged position, cleaners and other people that yard maintenance and other things like that. What makes that harder than, even just having to do the work is sort of the friction around the edges, the things like what I would call tech support. And so if it's a morning of me having to help the girls with school, just the sheer amount of time it takes to find all the links, to log on, to take pictures of the workbooks or the worksheets that were actually done, upload it. What is the role of smoothing some of those pieces out? Because that actually is the unseen kind of pieces that are really the straw that's breaking the camel's back, to supplement education in school, but also how do we not make that feel like a fire hose? The first couple of weeks of COVID, it felt like I'd wake up to an inbox of options of things that I could be doing with my kids. How do we make that, how do we help families navigate that and really understand what is best for when and all of those pieces? Those are some of the things that I've been seeing over the last, weeks and months.
And that's an interesting point, Avni, and thank you for sharing. It's interesting because pre-COVID, I feel like there were a lot of solutions being built in the edtech space to help teachers with their time burden and consolidating applications and solving interoperability issues because they were overwhelmed by the kinds of different platforms they had to navigate through. And now, to your point, it feels like parents are being overwhelmed. They're trying to juggle their day jobs. They have all these different applications. They're trying to upload their kids' homework. So that's a really crucial point. Steven, I'd love for you to weigh in as well on this.
Sure. If you take a step back, what you're seeing is the failure of institutions in our society, and they have not been able to keep up with the times. What you really have is the backdrop of how technology continues to eat the world. This is the dawn of the AI century. So anything that can be automated will be. And I feel like COVID has really given everyone a front row seat at how education is not prepared to teach 21st century skills. I think all of us, that have kids, as parents, you see a teacher in front of a Zoom, doesn't work. You need storytelling. And I feel like the need for 21st century skills, I think parents are now realizing, wow, how are my kids going to learn this? If you have the, backup of the AI era and you're trying to really educate the workforce of tomorrow, today, well, you need to learn literacy skills that are beyond just, kind of vocabulary and numeracy. You actually need to have financial literacy. You need to have environmental literacy. You have to actually need not just STEM, but STEAM, but you also need to have the learning skills of creativity and collaboration, communication, and critical thinking, and arguably most important, the life skills. These are the things that you're not going to find in the classroom. And I feel that because of our institutions failing us, families are going to bring brands to enrich their kids' lives because they have to.
Yeah, and that this kind of is a perfect intro and kind of segue to my next question, which is, as you mentioned, if institutions are failing us and putting a teacher in front of a Zoom is not working in the way it should, how does this moment COVID in particular changed the way we think about the educator's role. But, in what way can education technology actually enhance the educator and help them in their newfound role? So, Steven, maybe I'd start with you on this question.
I feel like the way that we're approaching it is kids learn best through play. Kids are natural learners, and one of our advisors and one of our biggest my folks that I look up to is Sir Ken Robinson, who has that famous TED Talk, How Schools Kill Creativity, and he always talks about we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it, right? Because schools kill creativity, and I feel that just to focus on ed tech, it's not about that, right? That's a means to an end. You have to think about what is the end and how do you really inspire and spark this love of learning. And if you truly understand how we learn as human beings, it all comes down to storytelling. And like, what are we doing right now? We're actually telling a story. We're giving them our perspectives, our life experiences. And I feel like that's also what you see in the unrest in the streets and the protesters, that certain people's stories have not been heard, they have not been told, or they haven't been accurately told.
Neal, I know you're trying to do the same thing where, to Steven's point, you're trying to blend entertainment and education and make it engaging for that child. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
So, our core focus is on 0 to 5. And just to evangelize a little bit, the reason that 0 to 5 is so important, and some of you may have heard this anecdotally, is that 85% of a child's cognitive development occurs from 0 to 5. Educationally, institutionally, we spend 98% of our dollars after the age of 5. So we have this massive missed opportunity when in the moment when children are sponges, they're malleable, they can be molded, they're shaped. We are underinvesting in all of the tools that they need to, again, achieve that best educational start to their learning journey. So the single greatest gift that we can give a child through our program the first 5 years is for them to have the confidence that they are a learner, right? That I may learn through, to Steven's point, stories and reading, or I may learn through conversations and questions, or I may learn through experiences, or I may learn through physical play and manipulation, but I am a learner. So that brings us to the role of schools and the role of teachers, right? Unfortunately, for many generations, we have taught kids that if you succeed in school in a very specific mode of learning, you are either a successful learner or you're not. And we all know in our own experiences that some of us did well in school and some of us did not. And some of us did well because we were able to listen to lectures, and some of us did better because we were able to read, and some of us were able to do better because we were able to ask questions, and some of us did better because we were able to experience. And children have to have that same level of confidence. So I think the role of a teacher in an environment where there are so many opportunities to learn, not just through textbooks and not just through classrooms, is part creator, to create those experiences. It's part curator, to be able to assemble all the different experiences that they have, technology, media, content being one of them, some of them, and part coach, to be able to keep that child on the right path and to hold them accountable ultimately.
And actually, I'd like to ask targeted questions now, because to me, what's been really interesting about COVID it's really shed the importance on the home, right? Avni, I'd like to first ask you a very targeted question based on what you're building at Modern Village. There's a lot of burden right now for parents in terms of educating their kids, juggling their day jobs. I mean, I've been on calls firsthand, seeing my partners trying to be on an investment committee with kids running around in the background. And the respect I have for parents at this time is incredible. How has COVID influenced, given how early Modern Village is, your thinking around the product and the needed roadmap going forward?
We kind of talk in terms of building the family OS. It's, for me, what all of the amazing solutions that others are building, that's what sits on top of it and how it connects kind of end to end. So whether your school uses Remind or Class Dojo or any number of these, that's fine, but it can connect in, and whatever curriculum the school kind of pushes, that populates into the Google Calendar. If there is a conflict on having to deliver some kind of class with a meeting that I have, I shouldn't have to manually scan my calendar for that. The software should be able to say, hey, there's 3 conflicts in the week, you need to resolve it, or you and your husband figure out who's going to be actually taking it. That's the level, and I'm not even talking about particularly difficult technology to be able to make that all happen. And that's really where we're starting. So if we can handle sort of those low-level logistics, a lot of times we're talking in terms of the time it takes to do these things. What I'm really interested in is the mind share. because so much of our mind share is taken up by this kind of low level stuff, we never have the opportunity to kind of think about the actual important things. And especially in COVID, we're seeing decision fatigue, cognitive load fatigue, like all of this stuff. That's the real stuff that's, of course it is hard to be like, waking up at 6 and going to bed after like, midnight by the time you can finish all the things that need to get done. But beyond that, it's a lot more of the mental fatigue that we're trying to go after and figure out how do we make this so that I'm not the one who's has all the Zoom links or all the information or what's for dinner and all this kind of stuff.
I talked to one of my aunts the other day and she said she's so tired of having engaging content, just not have the educational efficacy behind it. Because the reality is parents need both right now. They need something to occupy their child's time as well as help their child learn. And Neal, I mean, you've always, for as long as I've known you, thought about making it engaging and efficacious. And so I'd love for you to kind of first start, and then Steven, I'd love for you to also weigh in, given the fact that you so strongly believe that there needs to be, efficacy behind entertainment. How do you guys both kind of navigate this trade-off between having the solution be engaging, something that the child loves? Neal, you talked a little bit about invisible learning too, but would love for you to weigh in on all of this.
So, for us, again, with a focus on 0 to 5, and really in terms of core serving of the child 2 to 5, we don't have a choice, right? There is no learning that can take place without engagement. Children have short attention spans. Parents don't have the patience to force a child to learn when they're in informal education. And so there is no distinction in our world between engagement and engagement to our degree that delivers efficacy. So as Steven said, all play is learning and all learning is play for 2 to 5-year-olds. And that's the way that we have to architect our solution. So when we think of our core metrics, we don't think of engagement and efficacy as distinct. We think of them as a singular metric, but that in the creation of our content, we're creating specific content that has a learning outcome or an efficacy. And the way in which we're creating that content is through a lens of engagement, meaning it is interest-based for the child, it's appropriate to their age and their stage, it's in a medium that they can actually interact with, and it happens to be that this content also has an educational outcome, or in our case, a curricular outcome that it's intended to deliver.
And Steven, would love for you to also weigh in with Encantos, how you've navigated this trade-off.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it from a little bit of a different perspective, and also trying to address some of the questions that are in the Q&A and looking at from different types of communities. I think it's the kind of thing where we sometimes forget that the life experience of different communities are going to be very, very different. And specifically, whether it's a Black and Brown community, there are over 20 plus million households in the US that actually don't have internet access, right? So just like think about that for a second, that's crazy. And when you actually have over half of all kids in America being of color, and you start to overlay the fact that, that's why I'm so excited about what Avni's building, because parents really need these solutions. They need help, because if you actually are a Latino family, if you're a Black family, if you're a South Asian family, and you actually are working 2 jobs, you don't have the luxury to get a tutor, you don't have an au pair, you don't have these resources. Oh, and by the way, there's now 40 plus million people unemployed, and it's only going to get worse. These are real world scenarios. And I feel like this is where brands have to come in and play a bigger role to really enable digital learning if they can, or have physical learning, right? But to Neal's point about it being multimodal, it has to be both physical and digital. And I feel like the way that we look at it is it's a 2x2 matrix. Have experiences on the x-axis where they could be physical and digital experiences, but then you have different levels of engagement, whether it's passive or active engagement.
Thank you so much, Neal, Steven, Avni, and Karina. I think this was a fantastic discussion, and we all walked away learning so much about how the 3 of you are approaching education in your own businesses and ventures, and what we can also hope for and look forward to in terms of the future of how we can educate our next generation. And so we're really grateful from Neythri's whole team to be hosting this discussion today, and feel free to email us at contact@neythri.org if you have any questions or want to follow up on any of the points that were discussed today. Thanks, everybody.